Alright folks, welcome back to Heaaaps Games. So the Metroid franchise has been on the top of my mind recently, obviously with the recent Metroid Prime Remaster coming out, and I've been playing through that. I've shared my first impressions on that about 2 weeks back. But what I wanted to do today is I actually wanted to cover my top 5 Metroid games and also get some honorable mentions and maybe showcase some of my collection as well. So let's do this. So before I kick into the list, I want to share maybe some general thoughts on the Metroid franchise overall. You know, I absolutely love it. I'm a mega fan. There's loads of big fans of this IP, and I think it's probably one of Nintendo's strongest IPs outside of Mario. However, it isn't as popular, and I have to be honest about that. And that shows in sales figures. But what I have noted, I suppose, since the resurgence really in 2019 with Metroid Dread, it's picked up a kind of a new school fan base, and I think that's part and parcel of the fact is there's been a resurgence of old school design, hard difficulties, and also not all this hand holding you get from a lot of these AAA titles. So it's been quite refreshing for other people outside of the normal fan base. And what's great to see as well is the recent remaster of Metroid Prime is selling incredibly well. The fact is, it's been sold out on many of the online platforms for the physical editions, but I also see Nintendo has promised new stock of the Prime remaster. So look, that's got to mean something, it's got to count for something, and it's got to be good news for fans and new fans alike of the Metroid franchise in general. So just to be clear before I get into the list again, these are the games that I have played and I have beaten in the Metroid franchise. I haven't actually beaten everything. Again, these are my personal experiences, the games I've played. So starting off straight off the bat is Metroid Fusion. And I actually recently kind of gained a newfound respect for this game. Whereas originally I didn't actually really enjoy it all that much, but I didn't really give it enough of a chance to accept it for what it was. And it actually has one of the best storylines in the franchise, believe it or not. And it also has one of the most sinister enemies, which eventually develops into being one of the prime reasons I absolutely love Metroid Dread, but I'll get into that in another while. Now, I've actually covered this game also in depth in another video. I'll just leave the link up here if you want to actually watch that. But look, just to give a quick synopsis of this was the very first Metroid title I really felt dread, and interestingly enough, obviously the sequel being Metroid Dread, it's because without spoiling it too much, you do get chased and hunted by a particular enemy, and I won't say what that enemy is for folks who have never played this game before, and it really sets the kind of tone of foreboding. Metroid has always had an incredible atmosphere to me personally, but this one ramps it up twofold. And look, it's brilliantly designed for the GBA in mind, and one of the best handheld Metroid games you can buy. Now, coming in at number 4 is Metroid Dread, and to be honest with you, I struggled with this one between 2 and 4 for an absolute age to choose which one. It's just such a hard choice because when I think about my top 5 Metroid games, they're all exquisite games. That's the fundamental flaw I have with picking my favorite. But look, if I was to just talk about Metroid Dread in general, look, it's a fantastic return to form for the Metroid formula and the classic Metroid formula, but also, as I mentioned, it took what it did in Metroid Fusion and it doubled down on that even more so. And the brilliant thing about Metroid Dread is it's genuinely, you are being hunted, you're being constantly hunted, especially by the robots, and also you've got a really menacing foe in the Chozo later on in the game. But it's just a brilliant game, brilliant design, incredibly challenging, probably one of the most challenging Metroid games I actually have ever played, and very rewarding once you actually beat it. The last couple of bosses I remember are rage-inducing, by the way, but yeah, brilliant game, and I actually do want to stream this sometime in the future just so we can all have a bit of fun and watch me get triggered as usual. But yeah, look, Metroid Dread is a fantastic game, but it gets my number 4. Let's move on to number 3. So number 3 has got to be Metroid Prime for me, and there's a very legitimate reason why. Not only is it an absolutely fantastic game, but it was a return of the franchise ultimately from a hiatus essentially when Super Metroid came out in '94 and we have not seen a Metroid game for maybe 8+ years. You have to bear in mind the Metroid franchise did not return on Nintendo 64, so it's actually 2 generational leaps before we saw the next game in the franchise. And what a game changer it was, because it brought the series to first person perspective as opposed to traditional side scrollers that we've always had from Metroid. But they did an absolutely fantastic job converting the spirit of what made Super Metroid so brilliant and brought it to a 3D first-person perspective. We still had the exploration, we still had the atmosphere, we had great action. So, I mean, they encompassed everything that made those games so good and brought it to a 3D perspective. And the dev team Retro Studios, as I said, did a fantastic job. So believe it or not, I've never actually played the original Metroid. So this for me is probably one of the first remakes, let's call it, that I had actually played. Now, interestingly, I know we've had this conversation about remakes versus remasters recently on the channel, but this is a true remake to the original Metroid. And not only does it completely expand on it by introducing everything that was within Super Metroid itself to the Metroid Zero Mission game, it also, what it did was it actually expanded on the game twofold, and especially the last maybe hour or so, it's a complete brand new area. Again, I'm not going to say much more than that for folks who have not played this, but an absolutely exquisite game. It was just like playing Super Metroid in the palm of your hands, and it just made some subtle tweaks to make it work as a handheld, in particular increasing the save slot locations across the map. So before I talk about my number one, let's do a little quick showcase of my collection and slot in 1 or 2 honorable mentions while we're at it. Okay guys, I'm just going to showcase these at random really quickly. I have my amiibo for Metroid Dread, ME, which is the AI robot that I was mentioned that chases you around the place, and then you've got Samus there. So an honorable mention here being Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, and the third game in the franchise of the Prime series. Now, I said this already, I've never actually played Echoes, but I've beaten this and I've beaten Metroid Prime the original. But this one utilised the Wii motion controls, and it would be great to see this come back maybe on the Nintendo Switch or something like that in the future. So that's another good Metroid game. Didn't make my list, unfortunately. And the infamous Metroid Other M. You know what, I actually like this game, but there is some real annoyances. I think in particular around, they've tried to characterize Samus a little bit more in this, and they gave her a voice. To me, it didn't really work. And the other thing that didn't work is you no longer collect your collectibles or unlockables. You essentially are enabling them throughout the game by just progressing, and it's enabled by a commander, and it's a bit stupid. It's really done poorly. Probably considered the worst game in the franchise. That's Metroid Other M. I got a Prima guide for the Metroid Samus Returns, really cool. I actually got that recently because I'm actually waiting on my copy of Samus Returns to arrive in the post. Another Metroid game I haven't played, Metroid Prime, obviously an absolute classic. There's my original GameCube version. Metroid Dread, as I said, I spoke on that one already, brilliant game. Here's another interesting one as well. It's Metroid Prime Hunters. So essentially, it's pretty much like a Prime game for your DS. It uses the maximum power out of the DS here, and you get this in a first-person perspective. It looks amazing, actually, to be honest, for the time it came out as well. So, yeah, interesting title. And I might actually cover this separately in another video, just to talk through some of the nuances and differences between this and Metroid Prime in general. Okay, moving on. Super Metroid, of course. This is a repro cart, by the way, but a pretty cool cart, and I wanted this one anyway. So, and this is actually really cool. This is a player's guide for Super Metroid. I actually got this off Retro Edge UK. Really cool player's guide for Super Metroid. Essentially, it's a little mini walkthrough in a nutshell of the entire game. And there's my collection of Metroid Dread collection itself. I've showed you the game already. The special edition came with a steelbook case and lots of other goodies there. I'm not going to go into the mad details of that, but that's a really cool collector's edition. And then lastly, my holy grail. My missus will fucking kill me. I only bought this recently, and you don't want to ask how much I paid for it, but I've wanted this for years and years. I finally have my copy. This is the original copy, by the way, and it's complete. It's got its manual and everything else in it. Just for me, this isn't something that I don't normally spend a lot on big retro titles like this, because you know it's stupidly expensive at the moment, a hobby. But this is something I want for myself. This isn't something, and I will actually play this like I play all my other games that I own, but I really wanted to get a hold of a copy of this, and I have been looking for almost maybe 5 or 6 years to try and get a hold of a copy, and I just finally bit the bullet and I did it. So yeah, there's my copy of Metroid Zero Mission for the Game Boy Advance. So yeah, guys, just moving back to my number one, it was pretty obvious at this stage what was my number one. Look, it had to be Super Metroid. So I want to share something that I probably haven't really told anybody on the channel before, but I've only experienced this game about 10 years ago, believe it or not. My feelings for this game are not based on nostalgia. So for me to enjoy this game as much as I did and to experience such atmosphere packed into a 16-bit cart was incredibly impressive to me. It's just a testament to the timeless design and creation of this game. For somebody like me, who has no nostalgia for this series, to come in and enjoy it as much as I did. And without a doubt, it's probably the best game for me on the SNES by far. And why it's also still so good, it's so infinitely replayable. We don't get enough of these games, new games now, that I feel like I want to pick up and play and then actually go back and play it again. This is still one of those games where you can pick up in 10 years time, play it again, 10 years time, play it again. Guaranteed. It's, to me, like the Resident Evil series, Metal Gear Solid series, Half-Life, all of that. It stands in that bracket for me personally. But anyway, guys, that's it. I haven't done one of these videos, top 5 videos, in a while. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Share your comments down below. Let me know what you think about the Metroid series. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to me, support me, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.